I should have known something was wrong when Hal Perkins called me into his office on a Tuesday. Hal never did anything important on Tuesdays. Monday was for yelling at drivers, Wednesday for counting money, Friday for celebrating another week of screwing over the competition. Tuesday was his golf day. But there I was, adjusting my blazer outside his glass-walled office at Brightwell Freight, watching him gesture animatedly to a man I'd never seen before. The stranger wore a perfectly pressed suit that screamed money, but his eyes had that cold, calculating look I'd learned to spot in 10 years of logistics work. "Lana, meet Clint Maddox," Hal announced as I stepped inside. "Your new operations manager." My stomach dropped. Operations manager was my territory. I'd built every route, trained every crew, handled every sensitive shipment that made Brightwell profitable. The pharmaceuticals, defense components, high-tech cargo. I was the one who made sure they reached their destinations without questions asked. Clint extended his hand with a smile that never reached his eyes. Looking forward to learning from the best. Something about his grip felt like a threat. That evening, I made calls. In the freight world, reputation travels faster than any truck on the interstate, and Clint Maddox had a reputation that stank like week-old roadkill. Tommy Valdez from the loading dock knew Clint's uncle. Ran a trucking operation out of Detroit that specialized in shipments nobody talked about afterward. Carla from accounting had heard whispers from her cousin in Chicago about syndicate money, cargo that disappeared off manifests like it never existed. "You sure you want to know about this guy?" Tommy asked, his voice dropping to a whisper even though we were alone by the coffee machine. "Word from the street is, his last job ended with the FBI raiding 3 warehouses. Funny how he walked away clean while everyone else got arrested. But most people don't know, they just see the fancy suit and smooth talk." I spent that night in my apartment, staring at Brightwell's employee handbook. 10 years I'd followed every rule, crossed every T, dotted every I. I'd built my career on being the reliable one, the trustworthy one, the one who asked no questions and delivered results. But as dawn broke over the industrial district where Brightwell operated, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to ask questions now. "I won't train him." The words hung in Hal's office like smoke from a gun barrel. Hal's face shifted from confusion to something like disappointment. "Lana, come on. After everything I've done for you? 10 years I've watched you grow here. I've promoted you, trusted you with our biggest clients. Hal, I appreciate that, but this company has been good to you. Hell, I was about to make you regional coordinator. But I need team players, and Clint has connections we need for expansion." His voice hardened when I didn't respond. "You're a logistics coordinator, not the FBI. Your job is to train who I tell you to train. My job is to protect this company's reputation and ensure smooth operations. Clint Maddox threatens both." I'd rehearsed this speech in the mirror, but actually saying it felt like jumping off a cliff. "I know about Detroit. I know about the warehouses. I know, you know, rumors and gossip." Hal stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across his desk, all pretense of friendship gone. "But here's what I know, Lana. You're making a very bad mistake. Train Maddox, or find another job." I met his stare without flinching. "Then I guess I'm finding another job." The silence that followed felt like the moment before a thunderclap. The next morning, security escorted me to my desk with a cardboard box. 10 years of my life fit into 12 inches of corrugated cardboard, family photos, coffee mug, the little cactus I'd kept alive through 3 office renovations. "Poor team fit," Hal announced to anyone who asked. Sometimes good people just aren't the right people. But as I cleaned out my drawers, I noticed something odd. Randy from shipping kept avoiding eye contact. Melissa from dispatch looked genuinely shocked, like she'd seen something she shouldn't have. And Clint Maddox? His phone buzzed just as I was packing my last items, and he walked away from Hal's office window, speaking in low, urgent tones. Walking to my car with that pathetic box, I felt 10 years of loyalty crumble into dust. But underneath the hurt and humiliation, something else was growing. Something sharp and angry and determined. I'd spent a decade learning every secret of Brightwell Freight, every route, every client, every weakness in their armor. They thought firing me would end the problem. Instead, they just created their biggest threat. 3 weeks of unemployment gave me something I'd never had before, time to investigate. What I found made my blood run cold. Brightwell wasn't just a freight company with a bad hire. Brightwell was a criminal enterprise with a legitimate face, and I'd been their unwitting inside woman for 10 years. The pharmaceutical shipments I'd coordinated? Half of them were stolen goods being laundered through fake manifests. The defense components? Sold to buyers who weren't supposed to have them. The high-tech cargo I'd been so proud of handling? Seeds of a smuggling network that stretched from coast to coast. I'd kept meticulous records, it was my nature. Now those same records told a story of systematic fraud, smuggling, and worse. Looking back, I realized I'd brushed off the warning signs for years: odd shipping times, clients who paid in cash, manifests that didn't quite match the cargo. I'd been so focused on loyalty and doing my job well that I'd ignored the truth staring me in the face. Hal hadn't just been running a business, he'd been running a pipeline for Chicago syndicate money, and Clint Maddox wasn't a new hire. He was their latest enforcer, brought in to tighten their grip on routes I'd unknowingly helped establish. But the worst part? I'd seen the signs for years and ignored them because I believed in honest work and loyal service. Time to learn some new values. Bo Reed found me at Murphy's Diner on a rainy Thursday evening, sliding into the booth across from me like we'd planned to meet all along. "Heard you got canned," he said, signaling the waitress for coffee. "Also heard you've been asking questions about our mutual former employer." I remembered Bo, a driver Brightwell had chewed up and spat out after an accident that conveniently happened right before he could testify about irregular shipments. He walked with a limp now, but his eyes were sharp as broken glass. "What do you want, Bo?" "Same thing you want, I'm guessing. To watch Brightwell burn." He leaned forward. "But here's the thing about revenge, Lana. It's like freight work. You need the right partner to haul the heavy loads." He slid a photograph across the table. Clint Maddox shaking hands with a man in an expensive coat outside a warehouse I'd never seen before. I'd been watching Clint since they kicked me out. Knew he'd surface in something dirty again, so I started documenting. Took that 3 days ago. The photo showed something else, a license plate, clearly visible in the background. "How do you know I won't just take this to the police?" Bo's laugh was bitter as black coffee. "Because you already tried that, didn't you?" Detective Frank Dalton had looked at my evidence like I was handing him a grocery list. Shipping manifests, financial records, photographs, everything that proved Brightwell's criminal enterprise, spread across his desk while he barely glanced at it. "Ms. Cooper, I appreciate your civic duty, but this looks like a disgruntled employee trying to cause trouble for her former boss." Disgruntled? I'd kept my voice level, professional. "Detective, these records show millions in stolen goods being, records that could be fabricated. Photos that could be staged. Without concrete evidence of an actual crime in progress, my hands are tied." But I'd caught something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition when I mentioned Hal Perkins' name. Like he'd heard it before in contexts that weren't public record. Later, Bo confirmed my suspicions. Hal's money keeps certain pockets lined and certain mouths shut. Dalton's kid got a full scholarship to Northwestern last year. Funny coincidence, considering Dalton makes $50,000 a year and suddenly had $30,000 for tuition. That night, staring at my apartment ceiling, I realized the bitter truth: if I wanted justice, I'd have to make my own rules. And maybe break a few while I was at it. Our first operation was surgical. A single shipment meant for Clint's crew, diverted to a warehouse Bo knew about in the industrial district. Nothing valuable enough to trigger major alarms, but enough to send a message. Precision, not destruction, Bo had coached me. We're not trying to rob them blind. We're trying to make them paranoid. I used my access codes, Hal hadn't bothered changing them yet, to reroute the shipment. On paper, it looked like a clerical error. In reality, it was the first crack in their armor. Watching those boxes disappear into Bo's truck felt like crossing a line I'd drawn in permanent ink my entire adult life. But as we drove away from the loading dock, something unexpected happened. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. How'd that feel? Bo asked, noting my expression. Terrifying, I admitted. And absolutely right. But as we pulled into traffic, I spotted something in my rearview mirror that made my blood freeze. A worker I'd never seen before, standing by the loading dock we just left, speaking rapidly into a phone while staring directly at our truck. Someone was watching us. Quick pause here. If you're as invested in this crazy story as I was living it, hit that subscribe button and smash the like. Trust me, what happens next will blow your mind, and you won't want to miss where this all leads. Eddie Lawton caught me outside my apartment 3 days later, showing his badge like he was ordering coffee. Lana Cooper? Special Agent Lawton, FBI. We need to talk. My first instinct was to run. My second was to lie. But Eddie's expression suggested he already knew more than I was comfortable with. About what? About Brightwell Freight. About Bo Reed. About a shipment that went missing last Tuesday. He gestured toward his unmarked car. We can do this here, or we can do this downtown. Your choice. Sitting in that car, I prepared for arrest, interrogation, the end of my brief criminal career. Instead, Eddie surprised me. We've been tracking you since you called Detective Dalton. That triggered a flag in our system. Brightwell's been under federal surveillance for months. He pulled out a thick file. You've done in a month what my task force couldn't accomplish in a year. Brightwell's been on our radar since Clint Maddox showed up. We know about the Chicago connections, the money laundering, the stolen goods pipeline. What we don't have is evidence that'll stick in court. The file contained photographs, surveillance reports, financial records. They'd been watching Brightwell for months. So what do you want from me? Eddie's smile was sharp as a blade. I want you to keep doing exactly what you're doing. But this time, you're going to do it for us. Working with Eddie meant walking a tightrope over an abyss. By day, I played the bitter ex-employee, making noise about wrongful termination and considering lawsuits. By night, I ran operations with Bo, hitting Brightwell's network with surgical precision. But Eddie's real genius was the network he'd helped us build: warehouse workers, truckers, dock hands, people Brightwell had exploited for years. They fed us information, provided alibis, created diversions when we needed them. You're not just running operations, Eddie explained during one of our clandestine meetings. You're building an insurgency. These people have been waiting for someone to fight back. The network wasn't perfect, though. One night, our inside contact at the main warehouse, a loader named Pete, nearly blew everything when Clint showed up unexpectedly during a shift change. Pete panicked and started acting suspicious, asking too many questions about a shipment. Only quick thinking from another worker, who claimed Pete was worried about his sick kid, saved us from exposure. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 10 years as Brightwell's most loyal employee. Now I was becoming their most dangerous enemy. But Hal and Clint weren't stupid. They knew something was wrong, even if they couldn't prove it. Security's been tightened, Bo reported after a close call at one of their warehouses. New cameras, new guards, new protocols. They're getting paranoid. Good. Paranoid people made mistakes. And I was counting on a very big mistake. Eddie's plan was audacious, a decoy shipment valuable enough to draw Hal and Clint into the open, recorded and documented enough to provide ironclad evidence for prosecution. 1 million in pharmaceutical supplies, Eddie explained, showing us the fake manifest. According to their books, it's going to a legitimate distributor in Phoenix. In reality, it's going to a buyer in Mexico who pays cash and asks no questions. The beauty was in the details. We'd make it irresistible, a shipment so valuable and apparently vulnerable that Clint would have to handle it personally. All we had to do was make sure Eddie's surveillance team captured everything. What's our exit strategy if this goes wrong? I asked. Eddie's expression was grim. There is no exit strategy. If this fails, we're all going to prison. Bo whistled low. High-stakes poker with our lives as chips. But as I looked at the operation plans, I realized something that made my chest tight with anticipation and terror. This wasn't just about bringing down Brightwell anymore. This was about proving that sometimes the only way to get justice was to become the thing you'd sworn never to be. The morning of the operation, everything went wrong. First, our inside contact at the warehouse called in sick. A genuine illness that couldn't have come at a worse time. Then Bo's truck developed engine trouble that would take hours to fix. Finally, Eddie's surveillance van was spotted by one of Brightwell's new security guards. We should abort, Eddie argued. Too many variables, too much exposure. But I'd seen something in Clint's behavior that week, increased phone calls, meetings with unfamiliar people, the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was under pressure from his Chicago contacts. He's desperate, I told Eddie and Bo, desperate enough to take risks he normally wouldn't. If we abort now, we might not get another chance. Bo shook his head. Remember, Hal didn't survive this long by being stupid. He's got instincts like a street cat. But I'd seen something in Clint's behavior that week that overrode my caution. Increased phone calls, meetings with unfamiliar people, the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was under pressure from his Chicago contacts. What we didn't know was that Hal Perkins had recognized the bait for what it was. And instead of running, he'd decided to set a trap of his own. The phone call came just as we were moving into position. Lana, this is Hal. I think it's time we had a conversation. The meeting was set for neutral ground, Murphy's Diner, the same place Bo had first approached me months earlier. But walking through those doors felt like entering a gunfight with an empty chamber. Hal sat in the back booth, looking older than I remembered but somehow more dangerous. Clint Maddox flanked him, that cold smile playing at his lips like he knew a secret I didn't. Lana Cooper, Hal said as I sat down. 10 years of loyal service, and this is how it ends. You ended it when you fired me for refusing to train a criminal. Hal's laugh was genuinely amused. Criminal? Lana, we're all criminals here. The only difference is some of us are honest about it. He slid a photograph across the table, me and Bo loading boxes into his truck, taken with a telephoto lens. You've been busy. Question is, are you working alone, or do you have federal friends helping you? My blood turned to ice water. They knew about Eddie. I don't know what you're talking about. Clint leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen, Lana. You're going to call off whatever operation you've got planned. You're going to disappear, new city, new life. And in exchange, we forget this conversation ever happened. And if I refuse? Hal's expression hardened, and he slid another photo across the table, my apartment building, with my elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson clearly visible walking her dog. Then we stop being reasonable people. Your family in Oregon, your sister's kids, they depend on you making smart choices. What Hal didn't know was that Eddie had wired me for the meeting. Every word, every threat, every admission was being recorded by federal agents positioned throughout the diner. But what I didn't know was that Clint had arrived late, slipping into the booth after Hal and I had already started talking. As he leaned over to greet me with what looked like a friendly pat on the shoulder, his hand lingered just long enough to feel the wires outlined beneath my jacket. "Insurance policy?" he asked quietly, his fingers still on my shoulder. The next few seconds happened in slow motion. Clint reached for something inside his coat. I dove sideways as federal agents burst through the diner's entrance, weapons drawn, shouting commands. In the chaos that followed, gunshots, screaming customers, overturned tables, I saw Hal's face as he realized he'd been outplayed. Not anger, but something like respect. "You really did learn, didn't you?" he said as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. 6 months later, I stood outside the courthouse as Hal and Clint were sentenced to federal prison. The Brightwell network had crumbled, taking down half a dozen other operations across the Midwest. Eddie shook my hand on the courthouse steps. "So what's next for the woman who brought down Chicago's freight syndicate?" I looked at the sign going up across the street, Cooper Hall and Safe. My new company, built on real integrity and staffed by people who'd been burned by operations like Brightwell. Next, I make sure no one else has to learn the hard way that sometimes the only way to fight criminals is to think like one. They fired me for refusing to train a criminal. I became the one they never saw coming. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where standing up for what's right cost you everything? Or maybe you've worked somewhere that made you question what was really going on behind closed doors? Drop your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and trust me, some of your experiences might surprise you. If this story got your heart racing like it did mine, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear about fighting back against corruption. And hey, if you want more real stories about people who refused to back down when everything was on the line, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. Sometimes the most ordinary people become the most extraordinary heroes. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your backbone strong.